Thank you everyone for taking the time to attend this webinar with D3 Security and Threatworx. Today we're going to be talking about real-time vulnerability and threat remediation. If you are a security professional, no matter what your designation is, if you work in the IT security space, chances are that every time there's a new vulnerability, it comes with certain nightmares. I know the last one, or at least the last most popular one, was around Christmas time last year, and a lot of people were held back from going on their vacation and were called back into the office just to sort of deal with these Log4J vulnerabilities. So we'll try and talk about our approach, our collective approach to handling vulnerabilities and how we can make it really simple for you to deal with new vulnerabilities as they come up. And we have some very learned speakers. So they are going to talk to us a little bit about the industry, the overall threat landscape, how they see it evolving. And it's going to be an engaging and fun webinar. We're going to walk you through one of the most simplest ways of managing new vulnerabilities as they come up. So just a few housekeeping rules about the webinar that I need to share with you. We are recording the webinar. It will be available on demand. So if there are others in your organization who are unable to attend today and you'd like to share the webinar with them, we will provide you a recording once the webinar is over. I'm sure, because of the nature of this topic, there will be a lot of live questions at the end. So we'll be sure to have a live Q&A session. You can type your questions into the chat or into the Q&A box. And as always, the best question from the audience will receive a $50 Amazon gift card from D3. Our first speaker today is Ketan Nilangekar, and I am delighted to have him on the panel. It's not every day that we have the opportunity to connect with such a learned and hands-on panelist. Ketan is a firm believer in proactive cybersecurity. He feels that that's the only way to avoid costly breaches and ransomware. And because of this belief, Ketan bootstrapped a product and a team. And today, Threatworx is one of the leading cyber attack prevention platforms. And they're disrupting the traditional silos of vulnerability and threat assessment. It is also my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, our very own Stan Engelbrecht from D3 Security, who's a well-known name now in the cybersecurity industry. He advises security teams globally on SOAR best practices and is currently the president of the Vancouver ISC2 chapter and the Vancouver Security Special Interest Group. I somehow always get that wrong. Pardon me. Okay, so without much ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ketan, who will get us right into the meat of the topic today.
Thank you, Amardeep. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. So before I deep dive into the details of how our combined solution can help and detect and remediate issues like Log4j in real time, I'd like to set some context on the more general problem around dealing with threats and vulnerabilities. Recently, we seem to be in the midst of a pandemic of sort when it comes to cyber attacks. Words like ransomware, cryptojacking, which have only recently entered our popular lexicon, are making a huge impact on our digital lives, whether we like it or not. And there seems to be a pattern to this story. These attacks are not one-offs. They are not something that are happening because of issues that we don't know, but really they're being enabled by vulnerabilities which we are missing. We are clearly missing using our existing scanning solutions. The recent Revil hacker gang got interviewed, and we have a quote at the bottom which says, this was because of just one vulnerability that they were able to get access to the entire network, and they were part of a big $10 million hack or a ransomware attack recently. So there's something wrong in this. I mean, apart from the fact that this threat has been growing, there's something wrong in our approach to this problem. Next slide. What we are consistently seeing is that the scanners and the tools that we have, which are supposed to be protecting us, are missing these signals. And one of the big reasons we believe is that this intelligence that we are getting for threats and vulnerabilities is almost always delayed. When the fact that we have to deal with the concept of 0 days when things are essentially broken through our networks, and attackers are using or ready to use weaponized threats, that's pretty late in the game, and we are usually in this firefighting mode of dealing with the 0-day issues when they are really hot. In addition to this, we are using sort of this outdated approach of intrusive agents which are very hard to scale and which really don't cover all the attack surfaces. It's not the best approach for the modern the landscape, the IT landscape, or the attack surface that we have. So these tools are failing in that respect also. And finally, there is no prioritization or a good concept of a prioritization for this kind of remediation. I mean, yes, scanners are surely spitting out reports telling us what needs to be patched and everything. But why should I patch a particular vulnerability over the other thousands that have been reported in the report? So that's a big problem, and we are seeing there's some innovation in that space where we are seeing remediation, we are seeing context, and we are seeing prioritization, but it's not taking into context the entire threat landscape, which constantly is evolving, it's changing, and that's where you need this information of what threats are really important for you when they are or even before the attackers get their hands on this information. So this priority and this window of compromise really needs to shrink down, which is extremely exaggerated today, and that's one of the reasons why we are seeing this. Next slide. And then again, we have this prominent issue of supply chain blind spot. I mean, all of you must have read of all the issues recently which have been highlighted due to or which have been linked to supply chain attacks or supply chain intrusions into the network. Your supply chain is now the weakest link of your cyber attack or of your security posture, whether you like it or not. Again, and the reason for that is you might be pretty good at as an organization, as an enterprise, you might be pretty good at protecting your networks or protecting your infrastructure against attacks, but your supply chain partners and vendors may not be. And today, the approaches that we're using to assess the posture of your third parties or your vendors is basically outside in. You're looking at the perimeter, the public assets or public presence of your vendors, and assessing or just assigning a risk score to them. I mean, that sort of approach is not very, it's practically very vague and not enough to give you a true insight into what's going on. Then again, everyone who's been associated with the vendor management program will know we are still doing with this sort of honor system based one-time assessments and questionnaires, which are not very useful to again judge the true risk. So we see that these things are up significantly, the supply chain attacks, and they will continue to grow because attackers are now realizing that that's probably the easier way to get into a well-protected enterprise, so to speak. Next slide. Then again, we have a significant gap in the skills that we need to protect our networks. And this might be because the technologies are evolving faster, or It's just that I mean the current climate in terms of the pandemic and the other events that are going on in the world, they are basically exaggerating this skills gap that we are seeing in order for the manpower that we need to address these. So throwing trained people at this problem is not a viable solution anymore. We need to have more automation. We need to have more smarter solutions which can take this problem and solve it for us, rather than depending on adding more people to the workforce and having more eyes on the problem at all times. So this again forms a part of the larger problem that we have to deal. Next slide. So to summarize, I mean, this is what we believe we need. We need to look at our entire attack surface. Gone are the days when we could afford to look at this problem piecemeal. We cannot look at your DevSecOps and your container ecosystem and your cloud and your vulnerability management programs and your third-party programs in isolation. They need to be consistent. They need to be consolidated. And for that, you need to really consolidate your tool set, because all of these individual silos of security have individual tools which are supposed to be customized, and we're still seeing all these attacks. So there is some consolidation required in the tool set space as well, because it becomes practically unmanageable to have like a dozen or more tools to address this problem. Obviously, we need to apply AI and automation where it's needed. I mean, for early detection, we know that today's AI is now capable of doing this or scaling up to this problem, sifting through the hundreds and thousands of threat reports and vulnerabilities that we are getting year over year, and giving us the sort of priorities that we need in order to identify which are the really important ones to handle. So clearly, there is plenty of room for AI and automation to come in and fill the gap of this the skills that we have, or the trained manpower that we need in this space. And finally, when we're talking about the supply chain, we need to realize that our networks are now blending into our supply chain, and that means that we need to protect our supply chains as well as we are protecting ourselves. So those questionnaire-based sort of outside-in approach is not going to work. We need to go inside out. We need to be more creative. We need to have innovative solution in order to sort of jump over to our vendor's firewall, and in order to get a better picture of their true risk. Next slide. So when I talk about AI powered, I mean, this is a buzzword today, but really, I mean, if you cut through the clutter, what we need is machines that are now able to analyze this torrent of information on vulnerabilities and threats that is being published all over the world. There is not enough eyeballs on it to make sense out of all of this information, and that's where AI can come in and categorize and classify and prioritize this information for us. So we believe that AI has a big role to play there. Today's AI is actually now able and capable, and we have off-the-shelf sort of AI components that we can use for this. And we need to do a lot of innovation. We need to build specific AI models that will help us, sift through this mountain of information that we have in order to make sense out of this. So this is one area that we have a solution. We know that we can actually prioritize all the threats and vulnerabilities for you in real time or close to real time when it comes to this mountain of information. Next slide. And this is where the action starts, right? So we know that we can get to the examples of Log4j, the reports of Log4j when they first started, and imagine a space where the AI was actually looking for trouble spots or information about the emerging threats, and without you having to sort of go after it. So the AI here is actually curating this information for you, and it's not only just doing that; it's doing that across the dark web and the dark web, and other areas like social media social networks, your Twitters and your Reddits, to sort of keep a consistent picture that you see on the right for not just vulnerability reports from certain sources, but across the globe. When Log4j came about, there was a torrent of information, a torrent of advisories reported all over the world. There's significant chatter about this on the web and the dark web and on social media, which helps us in sort of prioritizing this, which helps us getting a context. And that's where the AI can come in and sort of stitch this together as a consistent picture for us and give us a true idea of how serious this might be. And there we have solutions already which can predict the CVSS score. So we don't have to wait for security analysts to come in and assess the CVSS score for us, or even the probability of exploits in some cases. We can do that. And this basically sets the stage for us to say, okay, now we know enough about this this particular vulnerability. It is serious, and now we can look at sort of how we can automate the downstream activities, identifying its impact, and then automating the remediation as well. Next slide. So this is an example of one of the alerts that you might get. Now I know alert fatigue is a real thing, and everybody wants to sort of avoid that, and we don't want another solution which is going to give us just this alert. But this is the kind of actual baseline information that you need, which is prioritized in order to identify that, hey, Log4j came in, there was an impact. An impact was detected on one of my container images, or one of my cloud web applications, or one of my actual code that I'm developing right now. And now I can use this information again downstream. So this entire process of curation and detection and alerting, or the downstream triggering of these activities of patching potentially can now be all automated. So this is just an example of Log4j, but this could be true of any of the new Log4j type issues that we might see in the future. This is exactly what the downstream solutions like a SOAR solution like D3 will require in order to start the process of remediation. Next slide. Okay, so this is where it comes together now. Now we have identified that Log4j has emerged in the wild. We know what exploits there are. We know what potential remediations there are. We know how bad it is based on the chatter that we're hearing on the web and the dark web. We know about all the attempts to exploit it. We know if there are any emerging threats or weaponization of this vulnerability. And we are armed with all of this information. Now we are ready to sort of interface with a solution like D3, which has access to all our assets, or the assets that need to be remediated, and do the run some workflows on them. So that's where I think Stan can come in and take this forward for us. Stan, over to you.
All right, thanks, Ketan. So I'll set the stage here just a little bit, and it's exactly the point. The amount of alerting information that comes through, and the high quality of the alerting that comes through Threatworx on that side of it is really what becomes actionable within the D3 SOAR platform. And by this, to kind of set the stage, that initial alert that Ketan talked about and the information that's contained in there, once we have that within the SOAR platform, then it comes down to how can we template out the ability to remediate this without necessarily having an analyst have to get involved. Because if we know, and it's a highly curated alert that comes in, and we have the ability to fix it, or there's a patch that's available that needs to be applied, how can we go through and take the actionable, or rather the information that comes through Threatworx, and then make it actionable within the SOAR platform, and then be able to remediate those particular containers or other items that are vulnerable to it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have Amardeep go ahead and forward the slide here, and we're going to walk through what the playbook actually looks like in terms of the actions that are involved, how the information comes into the SOAR platform, and then right through to the remediation stage. So Amardeep, can you please go ahead and forward the slide? So And Amardeep, I may have you do pauses now and again to on the video side of it. So maybe just give it a quick pause here. If you can do that for us, thank you so much. So what you're looking at currently is the structure of a templated playbook within D3. So the ability to go and take in a consistent stream of data from your from a tool like Threatworx within the environment. Oh, is he having problems with the pause there, Amardeep?
Yeah.
It's okay. So what's happening here is we basically started the playbook working. Now it's ingested the threat already, and it's moving through, and I'll just guide through. Don't worry about too much, Amardeep, it's fine. I'll walk through it as it's doing this.
Okay.
So what it's doing is it's curating the list of threats that have come in initially, and you'll see that in the light green box to begin with. And then it's comparing those against known vulnerabilities. So you see here, I'm just going to go into the task details within the video side of it. You're going to see the list of CVEs. So what it's doing is it's taking in the alert information, cross-correlating it with a list of known CVEs already, and then comparing it to templates that are available within the D3 platform. So you notice the top one there, the Log4J vulnerability, the check mark is true. And you'll see here we've now called a nested playbook, which is the run playbook for Log4J. So what this is, what's going on in the internals, and the video will go into there, is that it's actually now going to be checking for items that are within the environment that are interconnected with the D3 platform, so that we can actually start checking for or the process of the remediation side. So now we're going to go into the playbook. And this is now actions that are happening. So it's going to get the vulnerability impact insight. So we'll able to grab that actually from the Threatworx platform as well. And then we're going to move into the phase of the Docker update. So what we're doing here is we're looking at getting the impact. It's going to bring back all the information into this particular area. You'll see likely click over into one of the data sources, but you'll be able to actually see all of the data sources coming back in to find out exactly what the impact assessment is on that particular item for your specific assets within your environment. So we'll let it run here. The next stage is going to be looking for an update. And I mentioned that this was a stage coming up where we have the ability to reach out after we've done the impact assessment to go, okay, what's the next item that we need to do? We need to check, is there an available patch for the Docker file, for example? And then how can we go ahead and grab that particular image on that side of it? So it's just moving through here. It's taking its time. And go. Just to double check, the video is still moving. Looks like it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, it's just going to be checking the raw information. So this is the information that's coming back from the vulnerability impact. So there's different ways that we can present this data, but this is everything that's coming back from that impact assessment directly into the D3 platform. We could break out all this information. This can be, there's a lot of things that can be done. We're utilizing it. Essentially, what's coming up is we'll be utilizing it to grab the image, but the impact assessment will give you everything. This could go into an email out to different teams as required, or simply notifications to different groups within the security division. So moving forward in the playbook now, we're going to be looking at the stage where we're going to actually update the Docker image. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go and check GitHub, and we're going to look for this update for Docker image within that repository, and we can bring back the results from that and see, what image is available, what the versioning is, what the content is, and other areas to make sure that we're getting the correct information for this update for the vulnerable asset within your environment. So that's stage one. Next stage will be building the image as it goes through, and again, we're automating the process. These are everything that a person would have to do anyway. So why not go ahead and automate this process and take this load off of the security team. So I'm just moving it through to the next stages of the playbook at this side. And next command is going to be building the actual Docker image itself. So we can do this automatically from within the playbook. You'll see here, we have the ability to build the Docker image, to go and get the Docker file. You'll see the parameter input there. And this will essentially just build the image out that we're going to be then utilizing to update the Docker. From there, you'll notice we're moving on to patching or updating the image. So we're going to use that build. And we're now actually going to go and apply it to an AWS EC instance here. And again, we can get the results from the push to update. So this will update the image within real time as it's moving through. And lastly, it's going to go ahead and actually run the update at that point. Again, another command that has to be done. So we're just basically automating the processes that a human would have to do, but taking that side of it out of the equation, because it's something that needs to be, that's going to have to be completed anyways. This is just the results coming back from the update. And then what we're going to do is we're going to validate the update by just doing another impact assessment on that. So post update, just to make sure that we are closing the entire loop within the course of the playbook. And what this will do is this will supply a report within D3 on an end-to-end basis. So from the point of ingestion from Threatworx of that particular vulnerability, to checking any type of impact assessments within your environment, to moving through to the point of remediation and logging and tracking all of that within the platform itself. The nice thing with this is that we can actually template these playbooks out. Granted, everybody's environment's a little bit different, so there'll be maybe some tweaks that have to be done. But you'll notice we've got another one down there in the bottom for Print Nightmare. But these are the types of things that we're working on in conjunction with the Threatworx team. So we have the ability to go and get highly curated information. Once there's a set patch or an area that we can go and template out, these playbooks can be supplied and simply updated within the client's environment. Very, very easy to do, very easy to add to the playbook. They're simple building blocks that are produced by D3 that can then be just simply added onto the system. So being able to take the workload off here, especially the ability to go and utilize the high fidelity information that's coming from Threatworx, and then automating the processes that a human doesn't necessarily have to get involved. I mean, obviously you can put in stages where approval processes, or you want to have maybe one particular final validation point that an analyst wants to do. Those can be very easily built in here. But the idea is that if the vulnerability is just that bad, it really should get looked at getting past that particular stage. And that's really the idea behind dealing with the skills gap, or essentially the lack of people within the space. I mean, the industry as a whole is really hurting for people, but as Ketan pointed out, we're beyond the point of just throwing bodies at these problems. We really do need a smarter way of working and a more automated way of working, and really just putting people in the positions to actually just maybe validate, but not have to go out and run around to all the different tool spaces within the environment. I think one of the biggest things that we run into problems with is not so much that we're lacking information; it's lacking the ability and the time to actually take care of those items. I think, Amardeep, if you move on to the next slide, we're gonna showcase what part of the problem is, and that's just the dwell time, or the lack of time to be able to go and remediate these items. So this here is a pretty classic example. Maybe Kate, what I'll do is I'll hand it back to you to kind of walk through, but this really highlights the time gap between a CVE being produced and people actually patching it and fixing these things, versus the ability for attackers to get into the environment. So I'll hand it over to you. You can go ahead and describe what's happening.
Yeah, and so this is again a sort of a template for the life cycle of the 0 days or practically any CVE or vulnerability that gets weaponized. If we have the ability, and now that we have this combined solution, we have now the ability to track these threats emerging as they emerge in the wild, all the way down to when we are in a position to pressing a single click and getting them remediated across our enterprise. So this is the where we are now actually have the solution to sort of shrink the window of compromise and the window of opportunity for the attackers down to a minimum. And again, using the AI, using the smarts that we have built into the solution, I think this is the sort of template that we hope that will prevent malwares, rather than getting into a stage where you use expensive, again, costly EDR solutions and other things to firefight these issues when they're actually when the attackers have actually compromised our environment. So this is I think the approach that makes more sense. Prevention is always going to be better than the cure, and we believe that we have a solution here that can actually protect you against not just Log4j, but any attacks like this in the future, and save a lot of money for you as well. So there you go.
Absolutely. Now, Radeep, maybe we'll move over into Q&A.
Okay, yeah. So, Ketan, I know you talked about how the solution that we brought here today is really a single-click solution to remediate any known vulnerability. I have a very interesting question that came in, and it reads that in some cases, vulnerabilities exploited by adversary groups are not publicly disclosed. In fact, there's a market for zero-day exploits. What is the mitigation strategy for them?
It's a wonderful question. So yes, absolutely. There are these fringe vulnerabilities which are sort of the unknown unknowns, possibly, if I may use the term. And how do we really track them? I mean, we know, especially in the open source world, there are a lot of vulnerabilities which never get tracked, which never get a CVE number assigned to them. We really need to do something about it. We really need to first start tracking them. That's the story. And we need a different approach. We don't need to follow the same pattern of, oh, let's wait for somebody to create a CVE for it. Let's wait for some analyst to analyze it. This is where the power of AI, this is where ML comes into play. This is where we can actually track vulnerabilities as they emerge out in the wild. And we can track the exploits. Like you said, there might be exploits getting traded in the dark web. We know of a few marketplaces on the dark web where such things go on. We need to monitor those. We need to be able to do that. That's what the solution is doing. We need to be able to get to this information as soon as it's out there. Because we know that the attackers are doing the same thing. They are looking for the path of least resistance. They're looking for vulnerabilities which are not public, which are not publicized, which are not just sort of unknown, under the radar. And we need to get to those before they do. So in that sense, the solution is capable of tracking these sort of unknowns of the world as well. And that's where we can bring the same flow of tracking the vulnerability life cycle all the way to remediation through this pipeline.
Okay, I have another question, which is probably for both of you. Can you give us a walkthrough of how adversary groups weaponize vulnerabilities? How does a CVE get used to deploy a payload and hit enterprises with ransomware and cryptojacking attacks?
Okay, you want to take that one first, or the first part of it anyways?
Let me take a stab at it. This is a broad question, but yeah. So typically, I mean, if I were to enter into the mind of a hacker, right? I mean, this is what they would do. I'm looking for. I have a goal in front of me as a hacker. I want to cause mischief. I want to cause damage. I want to make money out of the ransomware attack, or I'm just out for fun. That's typically one of those motivations. And with that, I'm going to zero in on a set of targets, i.e., organizations that I think would be the best candidate, would be the potential victims there. And I would be, looking for vulnerabilities. I'd be doing my own reconnaissance to figure out what kind of a technology stack, what their level of exposure might be. This is fairly, boilerplate stuff today in the hacker world. And after that, then the smart choices of which vulnerabilities are there, which are the exploits that I can use. Do I need to write an exploit for a vulnerability myself, or can I buy it off the shelf? I have to consider those options. Then I have to go, look at weaponizing those and choosing the right, sort of weaponization strategy. I mean, in terms of a malware, do I, host a phishing site for that? Do I need to, sort of do a brute force of some of the systems in order to get in? Those kind of things. Once I pick a strategy, I mean, that's when the attack can be planned. I mean, I probably coincide it with some time when there's less eyeballs on the systems, and that's when I execute the attack. So that's what's going on in the hacker mindset. And today it's not just one lone wolf sort of a hacker. It's usually gangs or groups of these people who are highly motivated, who are primarily doing it for money, and that's what we are up against. And then that's the real life sort of picture of what's going on out there.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. I think the money obviously is a big motivator on that side of it. There's oftentimes multi-facets to the attack. It may not necessarily be the same group that does the initial entry, so to speak, into an organization. Oftentimes, you'll see like ransomware as a service, right, where you'll have one particular group of threat actors that will actually do the initial break-in, but then they'll sell the credentials, they'll sell the ability to get into the environment, and another group will then look at the vulnerabilities that are available. These people take the path of least resistance. So going back to unpatched areas or areas where people just haven't gotten the time, and the shortening that time frame for when the vulnerability is available for them to utilize greatly reduces that particular item, because they're gonna, if they walk in and they find an area that's unpatched, to the point of that the ransomware slide you had, they're gonna do that. They're gonna check for all those things first, because that's usually a failure within most organizations. If they don't have the people to do it, or they don't have the tools to do it, or there's systems that are just hanging out in the wild that are just really, really easy to exploit.
Yeah, I think we've covered a very powerful topic today, and I would say it's really something which, had it been around when Log4j or some of the previous vulnerabilities came up, it would have saved people a lot of time. I know from some of my personal conversations that people spent weeks and weeks remediating those vulnerabilities, and here we talked about how we can remediate them at a single click. So it's a very powerful solution. For our audience and all our attendees today, I encourage you that if you have any further questions, please type them into the Q&A or the chat button. I'm down to my last question, so I'm going to ask this question, and then if we have some more, we'll answer them, or if not, then we'll call it a day. So the last question that we have is that, speaking of supply chain attacks, can using open source software increase the risk of supply chain? What's causing a 650% rise in them?
Right.
You want to start off? Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So open source, the proliferation of open source in not just enterprise applications, but also in common applications that are used by our supply chains or vendors and partners, is a big problem. It's not just open source though. I mean, it's all our solutions. It's all the entire software stack. Like one of the supply chain softwares, I mean, that was breached last year, or was a cause of a breach last year was actually a security solution which was supposed to, protect us against events like this. So it's open season in terms of what the attackers or how the attackers might choose to get in. The common theme obviously is that the supply chain exposure is unknown to us, and that's the area where we need to be able to sort of go in with a solution like this and at least get a view of what the true picture of the supply chain exposure is. And this is where the real problem is. Today we are not able to do that. Today we are relying on sort of this honor system questionnaires and stuff to judge that, and that clearly is not working out for us. So this is where we need to improve. Open source will continue to be a big force in terms of new application, new code just that is being written out there. It's just practical to use open source wherever it makes sense, so that the enterprise will continue to do that. But at the same time, it's not just open source. It's beyond. It's basically your entire attack surface now, not just for you, but your supply chain as well.
Points.
Thanks, Ketan. Stan, would you like to take a stab at it too?
I mean, Ketan did a good job of answering it. We can't look at it as just the open source side of it. Right now, if I think about the types of assessments that are done right now in terms of the supply chain, it's a lot of just a checkbox exercise. So
Yep.
Getting the vulnerability, getting the visibility into what's really happening within the supply chain is really key. And that's something that the solution moving forward is designed to do. So Ketan did a good job of answering it. It's no problem. It's a matter of addressing it.
Okay, I see that there are no further questions that have come in. So I think we can give people 15 minutes back in the day. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our attendees who made time to join today's webinar. And thank you to our guest, Ketan, for taking time from his busy schedule to join the webinar today. And thank you, Stan, for making time and sharing very powerful 1-minute solution to remediate vulnerabilities like Log4j. If you guys have any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at marketing@d3security.com, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Get in touch. Stay connected, stay safe. Have a great day ahead. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.